This episode was co-produced by Startup Days, the Swiss networking and business event for startups, investors, enablers, and corporates. Check out Newcomers, the ultimate pitching format for pre-seed and seed startups in Switzerland. Applications are open from December 2nd, 2024 until March 16th, 2025. Find out more at startupdays.ch. Again, that's startupdays.ch.
You cannot just always expect what's gonna happen. Maybe at some points you just have to dive in, and then suddenly you happen to be talking to someone that knows someone else that is basically your first multinational corporate client. And I think that's really, at the core of it.
Welcome to the Swisspreneur Show, a podcast about startup stories and learnings from experienced entrepreneurs. If you enjoy listening to our show, make sure to follow the podcast and leave a rating. And now, here's your host, Sylvan.
Pascal, a warm welcome to the Swisspreneur Show. It's a pleasure to have you as a guest today.
Thanks for having me.
You are the co-founder and CEO of Manukai, an ETH spin-off automating repetitive programming tasks by leveraging available production data. What sounds mystic at first, we're going to dive into deeper and deeper. Before we do so, you actually earned your PhD in computational science and engineering from ETH. You also included a stay at Harvard in the United States. And I just wonder, what sort of were you developing and how did it translate into your startup eventually?
So our chair was basically one of the first ones to leverage AI in engineering disciplines and scientific disciplines since 20 years. So I think there is this story of my professor accidentally inventing the deep neural network for some of the tasks he wanted to solve 20 years ago. Nice. By now, that would have been more probably a Nature paper. But that was our research, basically applying AI away from the mainstream applications in language and image to I use it for engineering applications in the end.
And what was the point when he then said, this has the potential to actually create a company around it? Because that's a big step to take.
So it was basically evolving around this move of our professor from ETH to Harvard University, where we basically built a software platform that its purpose was to be easy to be applied to other problems. Mm-hmm. And when we had the chance to visit Boston, visit Harvard, we basically said, well, let's commercialize this thing, right? Because it's built for the purpose to be easy to apply to other disciplines. So let's do it.
And Harvard in the US, it's not only a big brand name, a household name, but also located in the United States, which is a bit different than Switzerland. Did you have a culture shock when you were spending your time there?
Well, the good thing about the US is, right, that everyone is very open and friendly and kind of welcomes you warmly. I think in a very large difference to, I think, what is maybe the Swiss mentality that is a bit more reserved initially. So I think that makes it easy to delve into the US ecosystem and the US in general.
So not a culture shock, but actually a nice time that you spent there.
Exactly, yes.
And you were basically, with your PhD, you were, on the path to stay in academics. This is usually also a decision that many ETH students have to take at one point in time. Do I continue my career as a researcher or do I start my own company? How did you make that decision? Because that's not always easy, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's always on these junctions in life. I always try to figure out what is the best use of what I did so far. Yeah. And to me, it just felt like continue doing research or going into industry seems to be worse than just trying to do the best ourselves. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, this generally holds true, right? If you want to maximize your own potential, you can build your company where you can really, max it out, basically.
It seems, or it sounds like it was a very natural thing for you to do.
Well, naturally, maybe not. But in the end, counting 1 + 1, like checking out the job market, checking out on both sides, academia and the industry, was just basically the conclusion that the best thing I think I can do is building this company.
Because also of the upside that you would get with it?
Well, in the end, I think for me, it's always really about realizing that potential, right? So if you know stuff, right? You know things that maybe no one else knows, especially after a PhD. And then the question becomes, right? Okay, if you go to a normal, company like Google, Facebook, whatever, can they offer me something really in this niche that I've became an expert in, or do I have to kind of create that environment myself by building a company? And for us, it was basically answer B.
Fair enough, and I'm very happy to see that, because we need entrepreneurs in Switzerland, but something that the big corporates like Facebook, Google, etc. could offer you is a big paycheck, right? You would have a very comfortable and big salary. And building your own company is probably way more stressful, comes with a much lower salary and a lot of pressure potentially. Why was that still the right path for you?
Maybe it's my grandmother that always used to say that money doesn't make you happy, but it calms you down. So I think having a big paycheck in the end will not replace maybe a lack of self-fulfillment or a lack of being able to really pursue and maximize the potential you have. So in the end, I think, that can never be an argument.
Definitely. So it was clear you become an entrepreneur. You did found the company in 2023 together with your co-founder, Daniel. You already got to know each other at ETH. You worked at ETH. You were in Harvard together. Is it fair to say that you already knew each other very well to actually then, make a company together, found a company together?
Yeah, so we really kind of built this software framework that made us found the company together. So I think we started the discussion already, several years ago, but really the inception was when we had a shared flat together in Boston, right? So you have time to talk a little bit more outside of work. And there it became clear that both of us really believe that applying AI to manufacturing is the best use of our knowledge and potential, and that there we can really make an impact.
Amazing. And I'm really curious, where does the name Manukai come from? What does it mean or imply?
So it's a combination of manufacturing. So Manu, the first thing, stands for manufacturing. Yeah. And then there is kaizen, which is the principle of continuous improvement in manufacturing. And that's really what we want to stand for as a company, right? To deliver AI, to deliver software that allows companies to improve themselves continuously.
Absolutely. And with your technology and the background from research, you could have probably applied your knowledge in very different ways, but you decided to zero in on metal machining. Why was that the right focus? It seems very, very specific, which is not a bad thing. It's actually the opposite. It's a very good thing to have a good focus.
So, we started basically with over 100 plus interviews in manufacturing industry as a whole. And at some point we realized, okay, now we have these 2-3 letters of intent, maybe pilot projects that we can do. And then one of our mentors asked us, is any of these verticals for you kind of the market you want to be in? Is it big enough? Are they willing to pay? Is it the right kind of people that you want to work with, etc.? And there we realized, no, it's not true. It's not, we cannot kind of take it that broadly. Mm-hmm. And so we went systematically. We basically used the classification by the UN of the whole economy. We went through it and realized, okay, maybe metal, plastic can be two big industries. Mm-hmm. And then, once we started looking into metal, we realized that's really at the core of Swiss economy, right? It's a very Swiss thing to be highly precise. And that comes from this metal machining industry. So for us, it was at first this kind of, falling in love with something that is very closely related to us as, Swiss company. And then also the market is huge, the problem is clear. So we decided let's stick with it and go with it.
How much of that decision was like a gut feeling where you just felt it by talking to so many different use cases and people? And how much was very systematic or analytical driven?
So, we did many interviews. So it was over 50 before we took the decision. Yeah. And I think, then at some point you just, feel it, right? Yeah. It's like, once everyone kind of confirms your assumption about what problem they have, and you can, in the end, for us, it was really also later at the point where we had kind of our idea for the solution, mm-hmm. that all these companies kind of finished the pitch for us. So we entered saying, look, we want to do basically this knowledge retrieval system for your post-production data. And then they say, oh, that's very cool. Then we can do this and that and whatever. And then you realize, okay, wow, that's really something that we should build, because if everyone kind of understands immediately what you're talking about, that must be a good thing.
I love that. That's a very good sign. So people started to finish the pitch for you and you started to see a repetitive pattern, so to speak. And then you knew, okay, there is something where it's worth to invest time and potentially money.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
And you work with CNC machines, one of the sort of first use cases of computers back in the day. So why is it now time for an upgrade of these?
So there is many reasons for it. I mean, of course, there is the whole AI story that is now evolving and became bigger, where also some breakthroughs, not just made everyone aware of the potential, but also on a technological level made several things possible that weren't possible before. But I think more importantly, it's really about the kind of lack of skilled personnel that we are experiencing more and more in our today's society, right? Nobody wants to work in a factory anymore. Nobody wants to do repetitive tasks anymore. And so in metal machining or in CNC machining, really found this one task that is, at the core of the whole process and is very repetitive. And with AI, we can solve it and make it more efficient.
Please tell us a bit more about this problem. Like, how severe is this lack of skilled workforce in the metal industry?
So you can check the numbers online, right? So it's really about one of the three most important skills that are sought. So if you're looking for some people in IT, right? People in the medical environment, and then it's basically these polymechanics or technicians that know how to handle these machines. So it's incredible. I think in Switzerland, the last number I have in mind is around 5,000 people that are seeked after. Yeah. And I mean, that's a large number considering the 8 million people in Switzerland.
Absolutely. I had no idea that this was like number 3 on that list. That's crazy. Yeah. So tell us how you then help with your solution. What do you exactly automate? Also there, not only on the industry, also on the process, you seem to have a very clear laser focus.
Yeah, so in the end, we really try to replicate the current process, right? So to think about what is the polymechanic currently doing, and then for each of these steps, right, we offer basically an AI that can do the same thing. And then it's more like an autocomplete, right? It will give the user a recommendation so he can just confirm. So he still he and his knowledge is still needed, but he can be faster and he can, maybe stop doing things that he finds boring and repetitive by just clicking.
I imagine that a bit like you're writing an email and there is a suggestion in like gray to complete the sentence. Can I imagine it the same way?
Exactly, yes. Okay. It's like you can think about it like autocomplete for filling a form online or, basically what you just mentioned, right? The autocomplete that you have when writing a WhatsApp message or whatever. Exactly. Where it's really about, understanding what the part contains in terms of features and then suggesting tools and strategies to produce these features.
And how much time do they actually save with your solution? Because that's probably an important selling factor.
Well, that was really part of the initial exploration of the market and the problem solution. So the answer here is 80%. So that's what these people claim. Or these workers claim, right, that 80% of the time you do repetitive things. And I think that's the potential we can automate.
That's insane. Can you walk us through an example? So people who might not know that much about that industry, including myself, how does that then work in practice?
So the fundamental thing you get, right, is the idea of a part, right? It can be a model of, for example, a plate with some holes and cut away some part of the metal. Now that's what you get as a 3D model, right? It's a CAD file that you receive as a producing company, and then you start basically looking at this part. And if you see, for example, a hole, right, you look at what type of hole is it, is there a thread, whatever. And then based on your visual inspection in the 3D model, you decide what tool to use and then also how fast the tool should kind of drill inside of the material, etc. And that's all things that very often are not changed from project to project, but it's something that, well, you once learn or you once get to know how your machine reacts, what tools you have on your machine. And once you know that, right, you're basically going to do the same thing over and over again.
So you basically helped me save a lot of time there of my manual repetitive tasks.
Exactly, yes.
And what about the quality? Like that's often also a very important task, right? So you can help me not only save time, but at the same time, does that also mean that I will have less errors in my setup and maybe even higher quality outcomes?
Yeah, that's something that we also project, right? So one of the problems with processes being repetitive manual is that it all relies on the experience of a person. Now, you cannot probe the experience of a person. You cannot optimize over the experience of a person. And what we do is basically digitize the experience of the factory as a whole, of all the people that work and have created output in that factory, right? And that makes it possible to basically do analytics, right? To understand how can we do things better, how can we do things faster and more efficient.
And in that sense, you then sometimes also go into mass production, right? With these products, does that also help me to reduce the cycle times to produce more with less time, basically?
Yeah, exactly. I think that kind of loops back to the skill shortage, right? For many, especially mass producers, it's also kind of critical that they currently rely on a few people that know how to write these optimal programs, right? And in an ideal world, you can somehow get this information out from the existing programs. And that's really what we build, right? We enable you as a mass producer to kind of, use this artificial system to understand why things work that well. And of course, then you can also use it for new projects.
Amazing. And what I really like about your solution is that you don't try to make people change their behavior. You basically say, how are they doing it today? And how can AI make them more efficient? So it's not about replacing them or basically saying you have to do things completely different. That's probably also then easier to adapt, I assume, that people just say, oh yeah, of course, I use Manukai because it's so easy and it feels so natural for me to use. I think that's an important success factor.
Yeah, that's one thing, right? You want to kind of drive adoption. You want to make sure that people can use very simple examples to basically test your system and understand and build trust around your system. Yeah. But that's, in this case, it's not just psychological, right? We are talking about machines that cost between $500,000 to $1 million, maybe even more. So you really don't want to make anything wrong with that type of machine. Right. So you want to be really sure that this system that you're implementing works. And I think it's also kind of this security mechanism that you need in this industry that forced us to adopt the solution in that way.
It makes sense. Yeah. Otherwise, if you rely only on AI, no more human check, there will be errors sooner or later, probably, and then you will probably lose the trust of the clients.
Yeah, and what is even worse, right? You don't want to lose complete control. You still want the highly skilled, very experienced people to control the system and maybe to improve the system, right? Because after all, at least from the AI I have learned about, AI is only good in basically repeating based on the data it has seen, but it's not very good in extrapolating to things that it hasn't seen. So the factor human that is able to kind of reinvent things or kind of think differently about things is I think at the core and very important for our society also to continue growing and to continue improving. It's not just AI that solves it everything.
Exactly. And I love that because many people get that wrong about AI. I feel they say it's about automating everything, but it's actually making you more efficient and you still remaining in control of the process.
Exactly. It's all about learning patterns that are repetitive and then giving you basically suggestions to make you better or faster in these repetitive things.
And also how we see the AI technology evolving. It makes a lot of sense that you're working on that in this very moment because there's basically a technological breakthrough. So I wonder, do you also have any competitors going in the same space because of this new technology that is now available to everyone out there?
Yes, I mean, there is competition and do it slightly different. That's the good thing about this, say, very new field. I think this very vertical AI is just, well, being born, just starts basically growing a lot. So I think we can still, in the way we do it, claim a first mover advantage. But yes, of course, there is also here other companies that try to solve the same problem.
And how does your business model look like? Because it is clear there's a huge efficiency gain, but how do you charge for that? Is it a traditional software subscription model, or how do you do it?
Yeah, exactly. It's a subscription model, so it's value-based. So basically, we always try to bring the user very close to what value we create, and then, of course, negotiate a fair subscription such that he pays his contribution, but is also benefiting from us.
And how did you arrive at the calculation of this? Because that's something that is not science, but probably more of an art, I imagine. So did you just say, okay, this is the cost savings that you have because of the higher efficiency, and then you sort of attach a price tag to that, or how did you calculate it?
Yeah, exactly, right? So if you save people's time, you can maybe use the salary of that person or the internal cost, right, for having that employee. And if you improve the efficiency of a machine, right, it's the same thing, right? You also, every company has an internal price tag to, say, an hour runtime of the machine. And then, yes, if you save from 1,000 hours, you save 100 hours. That's how much value you basically unlock.
And then you have to split that value. So you save them not only time, but actually also make a business case for the company.
Exactly. Yeah. So in our case, again, that links back to what we also said before, right? So of course, by saving a human's time, they don't go away, right? Don't just pay them less because they have less things to do. But what we really see where value is created, that they can do more things in less time. They can increase the throughput, they can become more competitive, right? Because it's cheaper, they are faster to deliver their products. And I think what is also important is that they free their mind to do what we said before, to like reinvent or invent new things that weren't possible before. Because I think that's what happens if you take away the repetitive things from the human day-to-day life. They start to think and they start to invent new things.
I also want to talk about a few obstacles along the journey that you had to manage so far. We talked about the interviews already. So you started to see the repetitive patterns, right? And you see, okay, there's something there that we can tackle. How do you then go about validating these things from the interviews in a practical world? Because, interviewing people is one thing, but in the end, they have to send you money at one point and become your customers. How do you bridge that gap from promising interviews to paying customers, basically?
So in my point of view, right, there is always two sides of the story, right? So you want to basically do the best for your business. You want to create value to your customers and then make them pay you for that value. But on the other hand, since we are basically tech company, right, we build a product, we have this initial gap. So we also need to think about the investor side, right? So you also need to think about how do you generate value for an investor, as an example. And I think iterating these two, sources of requirements is what is your job.
And how do you actually do that? Like, because it's sometimes a balance that can be difficult for founders to handle the right way. Where you always say, hey, I have investors that I need to please, I need to show progress, etc. But then you also have the customers, of course. And in the end, they have to go hand in hand.
Yeah, I think there is always this instrument of doing co-development partnerships or pilot projects, whatever you want to call it. And that's basically our current approach. And we are closely working with several companies really to build the product. In the end, right, it's also for them. Paying something for this co-development partnership also means some stake, some skin in the game, right? So I think it's mutually beneficial. It's not just about us having some numbers to write write in the balance sheet, but it's also, I think, for them, it's a commitment, and then with the commitment, I think they are also looking forward to build a great product with you. So I think that's a good way to go in this early stage.
I love co-development because it's sort of an investment and skin in the game of the potential customers, and the very strong proof that you really are onto something. How do you convince them to do the co-developing? Is it mainly after the interviews, they confirm that there's a gap, and then you just try to convert them into paying customers? Because in the early days, you usually don't really have anything to show for. It's more the vision and the idea that you tackle linked to the problem that they told you. How did you convince them to become co-developers and also put money down on something that maybe doesn't even fully exist yet?
Well, I mean, I think the very easiest argument is, right, that it's not going to happen. If we don't get paid, if we don't get customers, we are not going to build it, and it's not going to happen. So I think it always revolves around this, I think, desire. In the end, I mean, that's, I think, the optimal version, right? If the desire from the client is there to have it, so they are willing to also pay their fair share to build it in the first place.
And how do you then do the payment part there? Do you ask for an upfront payment, or do you give them a heavy discount and say, hey, if you are one of the first 3, for example, you get 50% discount on your first year? Or how do you structure that?
So currently, yes, it works via discount. So our clients get a discount on the later license fee, and it's basically an upfront payment where it's basically a prepayment, right, where they pay in advance for the later license.
I love that. Do you also offer them any guarantees where you say, hey, if we don't deliver, you get your money back if there's anything left or something like that, to really build that trust?
Not in written form. Okay. It's I think there is a lot of things that you can write in contracts where you can agree on in contracts, but I think, and there we are also a little bit old school, where we say there's also kind of the gentleman's agreement, right?
The handshake
so if you
deal.
don't deliver, then I guess you should not ask for money.
Of course.
And, I mean, in the end, right, it's our desire to help them with our solution, and not just to earn money and gain money.
Yeah. And if you do the co-development, the co-creation successfully, eventually that would even allow you to finance most or even all of the development costs, etc. So in an ideal world, you wouldn't even need investors. So I wonder, what is your perspective on fundraising to get external money from investors to actually build the technology into solution?
I think this is, at least in our perspective, there is only one metric that defines whether you need external investments or not. And that's really kind of the initial investment that is needed to develop the product. Yeah. Right. So if you can generate value for a client from day one, then I think it's very important to, try to bootstrap it, try to build it yourself. But yeah, I mean, I think for us, it's a case where it's going to take still some months for the final product to work and to generate value for the client. And then it's a bit harder, right? Because you cannot ask for an upfront payment if you have nothing to offer in return.
Fair. What are we talking about here? Like this upfront investment, how much money do you need to put that technology out there?
So currently we are raising a 1.2 million pre-seed round. And I think with that, we can really not just build and finish the product, but also enter the market and show how the demand is and how fast we can scale.
And I'm sure that your interviews and sort of the early co-development, co-creation partnerships, that this probably helps to build trust and interest with investors.
Yes, of course, right? If you have a very clear problem that it's also easy to validate for them, that helps a lot. I think it's always hard to kind of find the balance between this very clear, defined problem and the grand vision, right? Because in the end, right, every investor, especially every VC, is looking for this multi-billion-dollar company. And yeah, of course, the more, I would say, easy to understand the problem it is, the harder it gets to imagine that this can become this multi-billion-dollar business, right? Because then suddenly you think, oh, well, there must be competition. Oh, this cannot be such a big problem. Otherwise, everyone else would have solved it already. and so, yeah, I think that's it helps, but it can also be hard down the road.
I imagine there's also this trade-off, right? Because finding investors also takes a lot of time and energy from you as a founder. And that's time and energy that you could also be investing in the product or in customer acquisition. So it's also a bit of a trade-off of your energy and time that you invest in that case, in the investor search.
Yes, that's true. I think, I mean, at least that's the message I got very often, that's the number one job you have as a CEO, to make sure that your company doesn't go bankrupt. So,
Exactly.
Thinking about that in this way, right, of course, is part of the game. You need to make sure to stay solvent, to be able to pay your salaries and everything. Yeah. So and it's also interesting, right? In the end, all these investors are also just people, and in the end, I think it's all a people's game, whether it's about the clients or the investors, and you need to be open to go out there, get your feedback, go back at work and improve yourself, and then at some point maybe you're going to be this one-hit wonder, or not one-hit wonder, basically immediate success.
Where do you currently stand in terms of the product development? I know you're talking to users, etc., but what is the current status and your timeline to push this to market into a real use case with customers?
So we have now validated the technology. So you need to understand that we didn't just take an off-the-shelf AI model and we're able to apply it to this very technical domain, but we had to build the model, the training paradigm ourselves. And now we are there where we say, okay, I think the technology we have is validated, so we can basically test it with user data. We can show that it does what it's supposed to do.
Nice.
And now it's about wrapping the technology. And I think timeline there is between 3 and 6 months to have something that I would say is ready to be tested end to end, so that is ready to give value to the client. And then, from there, I think it's not so far to have the final product live.
And the first revenue coming in.
Yes, also that.
I have another question, just out of curiosity. You have two very strong brands with ETH and also Harvard on your CV. How helpful are these two brands when talking to customers, but also to potential hires and talent and investors? Does that make a big difference? Do you feel that these two brands on your CV really help you to get the best people involved? Or is it more, it's nice to have, but it's not that much of a difference? The problem, the traction, the interviews are way more important.
That's a tough question, especially when you frame it in that way. So I think it helps a lot. So I think everyone that has this link to a top-notch university should be very fortunate about it. I think we realize that because we are actively approached, and of course the trust that we can do it is higher, because you have this amazing background. But then in the end, right, this doesn't buy you anything, right? It's not that you can either pay salaries for it, or that's the solution for the problem. You still have to build it. So I think in the end, right, maybe you get a little bit more, say, trust upfront, but the challenge remains the same. You're still in the game to solve a particular problem, and if you don't do that, it doesn't help if you have some nice name on your CV.
So it's like a head start, but not more than that.
Exactly, yes.
Fair point. And where do you currently stand in terms of the fundraise? So do you already have the round closed, or where do you stand in that regard?
So we are in the middle of closing, expanding. It's maybe how
it's all very fluid.
Be. It's all very fluid, but yes, I mean, we are preparing the documentation now. We have commitments from several angel investors and are in the final discussions with VCs. And I think at least the minimal amount that we need in order to push it forward is secured. And now it's all about topping it up and maybe build it even faster.
The cherry on the top.
Exactly, yes.
I love that. So we are headed towards an AI-centric world. You will or are on the way to become a very important part on that journey. What are the next steps? Of course, closing the fundraising, then getting the first customers on board. But what are sort of the next milestones that you tackle, especially also with the funds that you're raising? Where do you want to take the company with that money?
So the idea really is to arrive at the point where we can prove product market fit in the DACH region. So where we have a repetitive sales motion, not just for our, say, home market in the German-speaking Swiss market, but also in the German market and maybe even going to Austria. Or there is also a huge opportunity in the North Italian region, or of course the French-speaking part of Switzerland with the whole watchmaking industry. So really to be able to show that we can, penetrate, say, the home European market and also have a very clear roadmap to go to the US, right? So I think as a tech company, especially in the AI space, I think it helps a lot if you have your one leg in the US market very early on. And so we want to be there and have the necessary metrics to then grow into the US market.
And I assume that's also the story that the investors were looking for, to see, hey, this is a big enough opportunity. The US probably helps with that.
Yes, I think that's one of the interesting things also about this market, right? Because when it comes to manufacturing, I think if Europe can claim one thing is that we're still mastering manufacturing. Yeah. And of course, as one of the most fundamental processing, that also applies for metal machining. And so I think that's one of the very few, examples where maybe the US can be thought of secondary to the European market. But of course, if it's about the tech, right? If you want to become this leading AI technology company, then you're better off to have yourself settled in the US as well.
So would that mean that you potentially have to move to the US as well in the foreseeable future?
Well, maybe, yes, maybe again. I would like to see also the other coast, right? So I had some time also during our stay in Boston to see the East Coast, and now maybe that's the chance to also discover the West Coast.
Fantastic. And I also wonder, you're starting in the metal machining industry, or as a very clear focus. Do you also see additional applications outside of that space, or is that something that you don't really think about these days because that's already big enough on the global scale?
I think we have a very nice, say, starting point. There's around 300,000 companies that operate CNC machines around the globe. So I think you can position yourself as a big player with just serving that market. But of course, our vision and mission is bigger, right? So we want to become one of the leading AI technology providers for manufacturing. And we want to do that by unlocking the value of data in manufacturing as a whole. And I think in that regards, right, we can play the game again, right? We can do what we did for metal machining over again for maybe plastics injection molding or any other key process in manufacturing.
Wow. We're really excited to follow your journey in that sense. That it seems that you're just getting started and there's so much potential and movement out there for you.
Let's hope so.
Amazing. So to wrap up the conversation today, we also prepared some rapid fire questions for you. I'm just going to dive right in. Do you prefer to make decisions alone or with a team?
It's always the team. You always need to align with the team. Otherwise, the decision is worthless, I would say.
I like that. Researcher or entrepreneur?
Well, I did a decision, so it's entrepreneur.
Research-backed entrepreneur, so to speak.
Exactly. Yeah.
What's your favorite thing about the Manukai team?
So it's really that we have this team spirit, right? Being together, enjoying also things outside of work, like taking a bath at Letten, saving a bicycle out of the Limmat, what we did recently. So all these, I think, small things that make you more than just some people working together.
Definitely.
Great.
Fundraising or bootstrapping, if you could choose?
Well, I guess bootstrapping is the more sustainable way because you don't have to give away any equity. But I think if you want to grow fast, it's fundraising.
It's not always possible to bootstrap.
Yeah, also you cannot, I think, grow as fast if you bootstrap. And if you want to go to the moon, well, you need a rocket.
Exactly. And the last question for you today, what has entrepreneurship taught you so far?
More than everything else, it's about talking to people. Right? It's about being open for feedback. It's about trusting the process, right? So you cannot just always expect what's gonna happen. You maybe at some points you just have to dive in, and then suddenly you happen to be talking to someone that knows someone else that is basically your first multinational corporate client. And I think that's really, I think, at the core of it, right? You need to be open, you need to talk to people, and be open to feedback and improve.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. I wish you lots of success and the best of luck. And I'm pretty sure that this was not the last time that you were sitting in that chair here.
That would be great to be here again. Thanks a lot.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, you can support us by rating our show on Apple Podcasts. This way, we can reach an ever-growing number of aspiring entrepreneurs.